You know how sometimes you just need to get away? Like the city noise gets so loud it feels like it's buzzing under your skin? That's where I was at. My life had been on autopilot for too long. Work errands, rinse, repeat. I figured a few days in the woods with just me and Bella, my husky, would be the perfect way to reset. I found this cabin online. It looked amazing. Cozy, secluded, surrounded by snow-covered trees. Basically, it was the kind of place you'd see in one of those travel ads where everything looks so perfect, it almost feels fake. The guy who owned it, Elias, seemed nice enough when I called to book, but he sounded hesitant. I don't know, he told me, make sure you're ready for the storm. Up there, it doesn't take much to get snowed in. I figured he was just being cautious. I packed plenty of supplies and loaded up Bella. She was already bouncing around in the back seat by the time we hit the highway, her tail wagging like crazy. She lives for stuff like this. Snow woods running free. I should have known better. Dogs always sense things before we do. The drive out there was nice at first. The snow looked like something out of a postcard, and Bella had her nose stuck to the window, fogging it up. But as I got closer to the cabin, the trees started to feel different. It's hard to explain. They were tall or darker, almost like they were leaning in. The road was narrow, winding through the forest like a tunnel. I kept glancing at the rear view mirror, half expecting to see something behind me. When I pulled up to the cabin, it was just as pretty as the pictures. Smoke curled up from the chimney. The snow blanketed everything in this quiet, serene way. But it also felt off, like too quiet. Bella was excited though, bounding out of the car and diving headfirst into a snowbank. I laughed it off. She was fine. So I figured I was just being dramatic. The first night was uneventful. I made a fire, cooked a quick dinner, read by the light of the fireplace. Bella curled up by my feet, completely zonked out. The wind outside howled every so often, but it was nothing unusual for a snowy night. I just started dozing off when I heard a scratching sound. It wasn't loud, just faint enough to make me question if I'd imagine it. Bella's ears perked up though, her head tilted toward the back wall of the cabin. Probably just tree branches. I mumbled, more to convince myself than her. Still, I felt weirdly unsettled. I ended up throwing an extra log on the fire, double-checking the door locks before I went to bed. The second day was calm. Bella and I went for a hike around the property. I spent the afternoon fixing the old wood stove, which kept sputtering ash every time I tried to use it. The snow started coming down heavier by late afternoon. By evening, it was a full-on blizzard. I stayed inside, made soup, let Bella snooze by the fire. That's when she growled, not a playful growl. This was low, steady, and serious. She was staring at the window, her tail stiff. I tried to laugh it off, what you see a snowman or something, but when I looked all I saw was the snow swirling in the wind. Still, Bella wouldn't budge. I pulled the curtain shut, gave her a pat, but that uneasy feeling from the night before crept back in. By the third day the landline was out. My cell had no service. The storm had dumped so much snow that I couldn't even open the front door. We were officially snowed in. Bella started acting differently too, barking at shadows, pacing the cabin like she was on patrol. I tried to keep busy, but it was hard to ignore her. It was like she knew something I didn't. That night the scratching came back, only louder this time. It wasn't just one spot either. It moved, circling the cabin. I froze listening while Bella stood guard by the door. Then came a low rumbling growl. My heart just about stopped. I grabbed the fireplace poker, sat by Bella gripping it like my life depended on it. The noise stopped after what felt like hours. But sleep wasn't happening after that. Every little creak or gust of wind made me jump. By morning, I was exhausted and more than a little freaked out. When I finally opened the door to let Bella out, I saw them. Claw marks, long and deep, scratched into the wooden frame. My stomach dropped. By the fourth night, I'd barricaded the windows, stacked furniture against the doors. The storm hadn't let up. We were completely cut off. Bella stayed close, her fur bristling every time the wind picked up. That's when the growling started again. It was louder now, coming from just outside the door. And then bam, something slammed against it. Bella barked like crazy. I grabbed the poker, my hands shaking. The door rattled under the weight of whatever was out there. It slammed again, harder this time, splintering the wood. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. But then, just as suddenly, it stopped. Silence. The next morning, I found blood in the snow near the edge of the woods. Deep tracks led into the trees. Against every ounce of common sense I had, I followed them. They led to a clearing where the snow was stained red, surrounded by the remains of torn-apart animals. In the center was a circle of stones, charred black like they'd been burned in some kind of ritual. I turned and ran, Bella at my heels. The fifth night was the worst. The door didn't just rattle this time, it gave way. The creature burst inside, massive and shadowy, with glowing eyes and teeth that gleamed in the firelight. Bella lunged at it without hesitation. I swung the poker with everything I had. The fight was chaos. Snarling, clawing, crashing into furniture. Somehow I managed to stab it in the chest. It let out a terrible roar. Collapsed. But when I looked again, it was gone. Just gone. When the rescue team finally showed up 2 days later, they didn't believe me. Who would? But the claw marks on the cabin were real. Belle and I had the scars to prove it. I didn't look back as the helicopter lifted off. But sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still see those glowing eyes watching me. I'm never going back to the woods. Ever. It all started when Sam suggested we spend a week at his family's old cabin out in the middle of nowhere. He made it sound great, peaceful, scenic, completely cut off from the world. No cell service, no traffic, just us and the snow. Honestly, I thought it'd be the perfect reset. I'd been working late nights, stuck in the same routine for months. I needed a break. In a cabin surrounded by snowy trees? Yeah, I was sold. But the drive out there? That's where it first fell off. The roads got narrower and icier the farther we went. You know how you can tell you're really in the middle of nowhere because the GPS just gives up? That happened. Sam kept saying, "I know the way, don't worry." And I wanted to believe him. But he was tapping the steering wheel like a metronome. I asked if he was okay. And he just said, yeah. It's been a while since I've been back. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. That's the thing about Sam. He's calm 99% of the time, so when he's nervous, it stands out. When we finally got to the cabin, it was older than I expected. Like someone should really call a contractor old. The porch sagged, the windows looked permanently foggy, and the whole place kind of leaned. Like it was tired of standing. Inside, it smelled like damp wood and something faintly metallic. Not bad, exactly. Just lived in. Sam called it charm. I called it drafty. We unpacked, lit a fire, and settled in. And for a little while, it was nice. The snow outside was piling up, and the flames made everything feel cozy, like something out of an old postcard. But then late that night, I heard something. Footsteps on the porch. I froze, listening, because I was absolutely sure someone was out there. Sam was already half asleep, so I crept to the window on my own. But when I looked out, there was nothing. Just the snow falling harder now, erasing everything. I figured maybe a branch broke or some animal got too close, but the feeling stuck with me, like we weren't as alone as we thought. The next morning was brighter, quieter, and bitterly cold. We went outside to look around. The trees were beautiful, all dusted with fresh snow, and there was this big open glade behind the cabin. It felt untouched, almost too perfect, like stepping into a painting. But then we saw the tracks. They cut straight across the glade, deep and deliberate. And here's the weird part, they didn't look like normal tracks. Too big to be human, but too precise to be an animal. Whatever made them, it moved in a perfect line before disappearing into the trees. Sam stared at them for a while. When I asked him what he thought, he muttered something about a moose, but he didn't sound convinced. I joked, "What kind of moose walks like it's on a tightrope?" He didn't laugh. That night I heard the footsteps again. Only this time they didn't stop at the porch. They circled the cabin. Slowly, deliberately. The sound of boots crunching in the snow was unmistakable. I held my breath, trying not to panic, but my heart felt like it was hammering out of my chest. Sam grabbed a flashlight, but when we peeked out the window there was nothing. Just the wind. And then we saw it. By the third day, everything felt wrong. The storm had picked up again, trapping us inside. The generator sputtered out in the afternoon, which meant no heat and no light except the fire. The food was running low, and Sam spent most of the day fidgeting with a broken radio, trying to pick up anything besides static. It was just past dusk when Sam nudged me and pointed out the window. At first, I didn't see anything, but then I spotted it. Something standing at the edge of the clearing. It looked like a person, but the shape was wrong. It's too tall, too thin. Its head tilted slightly, like it was watching us. And the way it moved, almost like it was gliding, not walking. I whispered, "What is that?" Sam didn't answer. He just grabbed my arm and pulled me away from the window. "Don't look at it," he said. His voice was low, but there was a kind of urgency I'd never heard from him before. The nights after that blurred together. We barely slept. The footsteps came back every evening, sometimes closer, sometimes farther away. And then on the 5th night there was knocking. 3 sharp raps on the front door. I don't think I've ever been that scared in my life. We both froze, staring at the door like it might come alive. When the knocking came again, louder this time, Sam whispered, "Don't open it." Not that I was planning to. And then just like that, it stopped. The silence that followed was worse. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind outside, it all felt loaded, like something was just waiting for us to let our guard down. On the 6th night, the cabin changed. I don't know how to explain it, but it felt smaller, darker, like the walls were closing in. I tried to convince Sam we should leave, but when we stepped outside, we realized the snow had blocked the path completely. No road, no footprints, nothing but trees. We made it about a mile before we saw the cabin again. Same sagging porch, same foggy windows. We were back where we started, like the forest had just swallowed the path. We finally got out, barely. I still don't know how. Maybe the storm let up, or maybe the thing watching us decided we weren't worth it. But even now, I can't shake the feeling that something followed us home. Sometimes when it's quiet, I swear I can hear footsteps in the snow. I was 16, and my parents had left me in charge of our family's old lodge for the first time. We owned this rustic little place tucked into the woods at the edge of a frozen lake. It was far enough from town that cell reception was more of a theory than a reality. They'd gone into town to grab supplies before the storm got worse, and promised they'd be back by morning. It felt like a rite of passage, me holding down the fort, all grown up. I wasn't scared. The lodge was cozy, familiar, and honestly kind of boring in the off-season. There hadn't been a guest in weeks. That night, I made myself a mug of cocoa, grabbed a blanket, and parked myself by the fire in the main lounge. The snow outside was relentless, piling up against the windows and muffling every sound. It was the perfect backdrop for my quiet little evening, and then the doorbell rang. I nearly jumped out of my skin. The sound was jarring. It cut through the silence like a slap. My first thought was that it was my parents, but then I remembered. They had keys. I put the mug down and got up slowly, my pulse already speeding up. No one ever just showed up here, especially not in a storm like this. When I opened the door, a blast of cold air hit me. There he was, a man standing on the porch with snow dusting his parka. His face was mostly hidden under the hood, but I could see just enough to feel uneasy. He was holding a crate, one of those old wooden ones people use for produce. Delivery, his voice was low and gravely. It had a weird upbeat tone, like he was trying too hard to sound friendly. I stared at him, confused. I didn't order anything. He tilted his head a little, like he was surprised I didn't know what he was talking about. Then he pushed the crate toward me. "Groceries," he said, "special order." He added the crate was full apples, some bread, stuff like that. It looked innocent enough. But something about the whole situation felt off. My parents handled all the grocery orders, and they definitely hadn't mentioned anything about a delivery. Plus, why in this storm? "Why now?" "Hold on," I said, "let me grab some cash." I left the door ajar. Just a crack, while I walked back into the lobby to grab my wallet. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears, and I didn't even know why. Something just wasn't sitting right. As I was digging through my bag, the old rotary phone on the wall buzzed to life. I nearly dropped the wallet. "Who even called us out here?" I answered it, expecting to hear my mom. Instead, a woman's voice came through, fast and frantic. "Miss," she said, "I'm calling from the general store in town. There's a man pretending to be one of our drivers. He's dangerous. Please, whatever you do, don't open the door to him." My stomach dropped. "He's already here," I whispered, glancing toward the door. The line went silent for a moment. Then she said, "Lock the doors." Now. I didn't even think. I ran back to the front door, but when I got there, it was wide open. Snow was blowing in. The crate was on the porch, but the man was gone, or so I thought. I slammed the door shut, bolted it, and checked all the windows in the front room. They were locked, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I grabbed the phone again to call the police, but the line was dead. Perfect timing, right? My cell phone was upstairs, charging in my room, and suddenly going up there felt like the worst idea in the world. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming from upstairs. My heart felt like it stopped. I knew I'd locked the back door and checked the windows. No one could have gotten in. But those steps, they weren't just my imagination. They were heavy, purposeful, and they were getting closer to the stairs. I grabbed the closest thing I could find, a fire poker, and crept toward the base of the staircase. Every instinct was screaming at me to run, but where? Out into the storm. I held my breath, gripping the poker so tight my knuckles hurt. The footsteps stopped. "Hello," I called. "Is someone there?" No response. The silence was worse than the noise. My legs felt like lead, but I backed away slowly. That's when he appeared. At the top of the stairs, it was the man from the porch. Only now his hood was down, and I could see his face clearly. Thin, almost gaunt, with eyes that seemed too wide and a smile that didn't belong on a human face. It was stretched too far, like it was carved into his skin. "Nice place," he said, his voice echoing eerily in the quiet. I didn't wait for him to say anything else. I turned and ran for the back door, my feet slipping on the wooden floors. I threw it open and stumbled out into the snow, not even feeling the cold as I bolted toward the woods. Behind me, I heard the man laughing, high-pitched and unnatural, like he was enjoying this. The snow was knee-deep, and every step felt like a struggle. I could hear him behind me, his laughter carrying through the storm. I risked a glance back and saw him standing at the edge of the lodge, watching me. He raised a hand and waved like this was some kind of game. I don't know how long I ran before I found the shed. It was this old, forgotten thing we used to store tools, barely big enough to stand in. I shoved the door shut behind me and locked it, collapsing onto the floor. My breath was coming in short gasps and my whole body was shaking, not just from the cold. Outside I heard him whistling, a cheerful, tuneless sound that got louder as he circled the shed. I held the poker like it was my last lifeline, pressing myself against the wall. Then the whistling stopped. The door rattled. I bit my lips so hard I tasted blood, willing myself not to scream. He pounded on the door, laughing again, each hit making the flimsy wood shudder. "You can't hide forever," he said. And then in the distance, I heard sirens. The pounding stopped. I peeked through a crack and saw him retreating into the storm, his figure fading into the snow. When the police found me, I could barely get the words out. They searched the lodge in the woods, but he was gone. No footprints, no trace, just me shaking in that shed, trying to make sense of what had happened. I still don't know who he was or what he wanted. But sometimes when it's quiet and snowing, I think I can hear that whistle again, and I'll never forget his smile. It was a few years back, right before Christmas. I had been feeling this restless, itchy sort of urge to get away for a bit. Just me in the snow. Work had been draining. The idea of spending a week in some remote cabin with no one around sounded perfect. My plan was simple. Read, hike, maybe mess around with writing a little. Nothing ambitious, just a quiet reset. The cabin was cheap, a little too cheap now that I think about it. It sat on a hill surrounded by forest about an hour's drive from the nearest gas station. It had the essentials, a fireplace, a tiny kitchen, and a bed tucked into the corner like an afterthought. The landlord said the power might flicker in bad weather, but there was a generator if I needed it. It was not glamorous, but I did not care. I arrived just as the sun was setting, the snow casting the strange blue glow over everything. It was beautiful, in that kind of eerie, too quiet way you only get in the middle of nowhere. I unloaded my stuff, got a fire going, and settled in. For the first day or so, it was exactly what I had hoped for. Peaceful, uneventful, and almost boring in the best way. The first weird thing was a sound. At first, it was just faint, like a far-off hum you would barely notice unless you were really listening. I figured it was the wind pushing through the trees, or maybe the generator struggling to kick on. But it did not stop. It would fade, then come back, almost like it was moving. Then there were the footprints. I found them when I went for a walk down to the frozen lake not far from the cabin. Boot prints, big ones, leading from the forest to the edge of the ice. But here is the part that made my stomach flip. They just stopped. No return trail, no slide marks, nothing. Just gone. I tried to brush it off. Maybe the wind had covered the tracks, or they had walked on the ice. But the lake was solid, thick enough to hold a snowmobile, let alone a person. It did not make sense, but I was not about to let my imagination run wild. That night, the power went out. Not surprising, considering how isolated I was. I lit a few candles, fed the fire, and hunkered down with a book. Around midnight, I heard something outside. Crunch paused then again. Crunch. It was faint, but unmistakable. Footsteps on snow. I froze, every nerve in my body on high alert. The logical part of my brain told me it was probably an animal, maybe a deer or a coyote. But it did not sound like that. It sounded deliberate, like someone walking. I grabbed the flashlight and crept to the window. The yard outside was empty, the snow untouched. But the feeling of being watched was so strong it made my skin crawl. I locked the door, shoved the chair under the handle for good measure, and told myself I was being paranoid. I did not sleep much that night. Every creak of the cabin or groan of the wind made me jump. And that hum, it was louder now, like it was vibrating through the walls. The next day I found more footprints. They circled the cabin this time, weaving in and out of the trees before disappearing into the forest. That should have my cue to leave. But I stayed. I did not want to admit I was scared, even to myself. That evening, just as I was starting to relax, it happened. A light. It filled the cabin so suddenly and completely that I thought something had exploded outside. It was not like the soft glow of a flashlight or the flicker of a fire. It was cold, sharp, and impossibly bright. I ran to the window, and that is when I saw it. A beam of light, like a spotlight from the sky, pouring down into the snow. And at the edge of that light was a figure. It was not close enough for me to make out any details, but it was tall, unnaturally still, and wrong in a way I cannot explain. It did not move toward me. It just stood there as the light pulsed once, then went dark. I did not move for what felt like hours. When I finally worked up the courage to look again, the figure was gone. By morning I had decided enough was enough. I packed my things as quickly as I could, determined to leave before nightfall. But when I stepped outside, my heart sank. The path I had shoveled to the car was gone, buried under what looked like fresh snow. Only it had not snowed. And there were more tracks. Bigger this time, they led from the woods, circled the cabin, and disappeared again. Then I heard it. Hello. It was my voice, flat, distorted, and echoing from somewhere deep in the trees. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The light appeared again, flickering between the trees like a ghost beckoning. Against every ounce of better judgment, I followed it. The light led me to a clearing I had not seen before. It was perfect, almost too perfect, a circle of untouched snow ringed by towering trees. In the center stood a single gnarled tree, its branches dripping with icicles that chimed softly in the wind. The hum was deafening now, vibrating through my chest like a second heartbeat. And then I saw them, figures just beyond the edge of the light. Their movements were slow, deliberate, almost graceful. But their faces did not have faces, or maybe they did, but I could not make sense of them. Every time I tried to focus my vision, blurred, the light flared, blinding me. I stumbled backward, tripping over something, maybe my own feet, and fell hard into the snow. The last thing I remember is hearing my own voice again, laughing this time like whoever, or whatever it was, found the whole thing hilarious. I woke up at dawn, the light and figures gone. My bag was next to me, untouched, but my watch had stopped and my phone was completely dead. When I finally made it back to the cabin, it was like nothing had happened. The fire was out, the door was locked, and the snow outside was pristine. I left that day and have not been back since. But sometimes when it is quiet and the snow is thick on the ground, I hear that hum again. And every so often, just at the edge of my vision, I see a flicker of light. I do not follow it anymore. The winter when I was 10 remains etched in my memory. Colder than any frost could bite. My family had moved once again, this time to a forgotten corner of the Cumberland Gap. Snow blanketed the mountains like a shroud, and our house, a fragile shack at the top of a winding gravel road, felt as if it were barely holding its breath against the icy winds that howled through the valleys. The forest around us wasn't just a backdrop, it was alive, heavy with silence, and always watching. The shack was a relic, worn and tired, much like my mother, who spent her days trying to keep 6 children warm and fed. My father, always scheming, was rarely around. Our only source of warmth was an ancient potbelly stove that devoured coal like a beast. The coal pile lay down the road near the woods, an area I hated even to glance at during daylight. But when the stove's embers grew faint, there was no choice but to brave the cold. That night, snow fell in a thick hush, muting the world outside. Inside, we huddled together, the stove radiating its last wisps of warmth. My mother, her face lined with worry, called out, "Jamie, we're almost out of coal. Go fetch some before it gets darker." I groaned. The last thing I wanted to do was trudge through the snow to the edge of the woods. "Can it wait until morning?" I muttered. She didn't respond. She didn't have to. The look in her eyes said everything. Sighing, I pulled on my boots and grabbed the old lantern. The cold hit me like a wall as I stepped outside, and the crunch of snow underfoot was the only sound in the oppressive stillness. The coal pile lay at the edge of the woods, where the darkness felt thicker, deeper. The trees loomed like silent sentinels, their skeletal branches clawing at the sky. My breath fogged the air as I shoveled coal into the wheelbarrow, each scrape of the metal shovel echoing louder than it should have. I tried to ignore the prickling sensation on the back of my neck, as if the forest itself were watching. Then I saw it. A light. At first I thought it was the lantern casting reflections in the snow, but this light was steady and moving. It bobbed faintly, like someone walking with a lantern of their own. My heart thudded as I squinted, trying to make sense of it. "Hello!" I called out into the silence, my voice swallowed by the cold. The light stopped. For a moment the world seemed to freeze, the air so cold it hurt to breathe. Then the light began moving again, this time toward me. Slowly, steadily it grew closer, illuminating nothing but the void of the forest behind it. Panic surged through me. Gripping the handles of the wheelbarrow, I abandoned it and bolted toward the house, my boots slipping on the icy path. By the time I burst through the door, I could barely speak. Mama gasped, "There's someone out there. In the woods. They have a light." My mother froze, her expression unreadable. She wasn't one to panic. But the way she moved, locking the door and reaching for my grandfather's old shotgun, sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with the cold. "Get your sisters into the bedroom," she said in a voice so calm it scared me. I obeyed, herding my siblings into the small room at the back of the house. The muffled cries of my baby brother and the whispered reassurances of my older sister were the only sounds as we huddled together in the dark. Meanwhile, my mother extinguished every light in the house, plunging us into shadow. Peeking through a crack in the bedroom door, I saw her checking the windows, the shotgun gripped tightly in her hands. The moon cast long, pale shadows across the frost-covered yard, but outside, the road was empty. The light was gone. "Are you sure you saw someone?" she asked, her voice low but firm. "Yes," I whispered, angered by her doubt. "They had a lantern, and they were walking up the road." She stared at me for a long moment before stepping out onto the porch. I followed, shivering as the cold air hit me. Together we scanned the road, the woods, and the empty clearing. Nothing. Only the eerie silence of the winter night. After what felt like an eternity, she turned back to me and said, "Maybe we'll ask Howard about it tomorrow. Let's get inside." The next morning, I woke to an icy house. The fire had burned out, and there was no coal left inside. Sighing, I grabbed my boots and headed to the front door, dreading the trip back to the coal pile. But when I opened the door, I froze. The wheelbarrow was sitting on the porch. It was neatly loaded with coal, just as I had left it. But sitting on top of the coal was an old, rusted kerosene lantern. Its glass was cracked and dirty, and the faint smell of kerosene lingered in the air. My mouth went dry as I stared at it. I called for my mother, who came to the door and stood beside me, her face pale. "Did you hear anything last night?" she asked. I shook my head. The snow around the porch was undisturbed. No footprints, nothing. We never found out who or what had brought the coal to the porch. Later that day, Howard confirmed he'd been out of town the previous night, and my father wasn't due back until the weekend. As for the lantern, Howard said it looked like one of the old ones from a storage shed near the abandoned coal mine, but the shed had been locked for years. From that night on, I made sure to fetch the coal well before sunset. On particularly cold evenings when the shadows stretched long and the woods seemed to press closer, I would glance at the edge of the forest and swear I saw a faint light flickering in the distance. Whether it was real or just my imagination, I never dared to find out. This all started a couple of weeks ago, during one of those ridiculous winter storms that turn everything into a scene from a snow globe. I live in a small town, Coldwater. Yeah, the irony isn't lost on me. Winters here aren't just cold. They're relentless. You don't think much of it after a while. Snow piles up, the plows come, and life goes on. Or at least that's what I used to think. It was a Thursday. I remember because work had been dead, and my coworker/best friend Rachel suggested we call it a day early. We carpooled most of the time. Her Jeep was better in the snow than my little sedan. It was already dark by the time we headed home. The snow was coming down hard, making these soft hissing sounds as it hit the windshield. "But we get at least 2 feet, Rachel said. "Think the power will go out again?" "Probably," I replied. It always did. The power company in Coldwater was about as reliable as a dollar store flashlight. When we got to the house, a little place we rented together, we both stomped snow off our boots in the entryway. The usual ritual. Coats hung up, gloves tossed onto the heater vents, the whole 9 yards. Rachel grumbled about the snow I tracked into the kitchen, and I shot back something about her leaving half her laundry on the couch. We didn't mean it. That was just us. Later that night I noticed something weird. Snowflakes. Inside. There was this thin, almost delicate layer of them on the windowsill in the living room. I wiped it off and checked the window, but it was latched tight. "Hey, did you open this earlier?" I asked Rachel. "Nope," she called back from her room, where she was undoubtedly watching trashy TV. "Okay, cool." I muttered to myself, shutting the curtains. It was probably nothing. A draft, maybe. The next morning Rachel was up early. Too early for a snow day. She was standing in the kitchen, still wearing her coat, sipping coffee like she was late for something. "Where are you going?" I asked, yawning. "Breakfast at Mom's," she said. "I might stay overnight if the roads get bad. You'll be okay, right?" "Sure," I said, not thinking much of it. She left, and I spent the day shoveling the driveway and binging some random cooking show. Pretty average winter day. Except when I came back inside there was snow everywhere. Not like a lot, but enough to notice. A dusting on the coffee table, little piles near the front door. I checked every window, all locked, the heater was blasting, and yet it still felt freezing in there. My brain went straight to logic. Maybe I hadn't brushed myself off enough when I came in, or maybe the insulation was bad. But it didn't sit right. That night was when things really started getting weird. It was quiet. Too quiet. No wind rattling the windows, no creaking floorboards. Just silence. I was in the living room when I heard it. This soft, almost glassy sound like icicles breaking. It was faint, but it came from the kitchen. I froze. For a second, I thought it was my imagination, but then I heard it again. Louder this time. When I got to the kitchen, I saw it. The window above the sink had shattered. Frost clung to the broken edges like spider webs, thick and white. Snow was everywhere. On the counters, the floor, even the ceiling. I swear the air itself felt wrong. Heavy. Cold in a way that made my chest tighten. I grabbed the broom and cleaned it up as best I could. But the snow didn't melt. It just sat there, stubborn and sharp like it didn't belong. I called Rachel to tell her, but it went straight to voicemail. Typical. Her phone was always dead. The next morning I woke up shivering. The furnace wasn't working. My breath came out in little puffs. And when I swung my feet out of bed, they landed in snow. Not just a thin layer, inches of it. Inside my bedroom, panic kicked in, and I bolted for the front door. I was halfway out the driveway when I stopped dead. Rachel's Jeep was parked at the curb. She hadn't come inside. I knew she hadn't. The doors were wide open, and snow was piled on the seats. Her coat was still draped across the driver's seat, stiff and white with frost. I shouted her name, my voice echoing uselessly into the cold. When I turned to head back inside, saw them. Footprints, big heavy ones like boots, but not quite. They weren't hers. They were too deep, too long. And they led straight into the house. I don't know why I went back in. Maybe I thought I'd find her. Maybe I didn't want to leave her behind, even if everything in me screamed to run. The snow was worse. It wasn't just on the floor anymore. It covered the walls, the furniture, even the ceiling. The air had this stillness to it, like the whole house was holding its breath. And then I heard it. Slow, deliberate steps coming from the hallway upstairs. I ran straight to the attic. It was the only place I could think of where I'd be safe, or at least hidden. I dragged an old trunk in front of the door and huddled in the corner, typing this out on my phone. The footsteps are louder now. Whatever it is, it's coming closer. I don't know if anyone will find this, but if you do, take my advice. Don't let the snow in, and whatever you do, don't look back. I just moved into this little cabin on the edge of town. It wasn't much. Small kitchen, wood stove, one big room that doubled as my living and sleeping space. But it had charm, no. Quiet, tucked right at the edge of the woods, and just far enough from town to feel like I was starting over. I needed that. The first couple of weeks were fine. Peaceful even. I spent my mornings splitting wood, and my evenings reading by the fire. When the first storm hit, I didn't think much of it. Snow in January, big surprise, right? But this storm wasn't like the others. It was relentless, dumping snow for days, and the temperatures dropped so low the air felt sharp enough to cut you. By the second week, I was practically buried, and that's when the weird stuff started. It was late one night, maybe a little after midnight, when I first heard it. A soft knock at the door, 3 taps, slow and deliberate. I remember lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking, no way, nobody just shows up at your door in the middle of a blizzard. I grabbed my flashlight and crept to the door. Every step felt loud, like my boots were trying to give me away. When I finally reached the door, I peered through the little peephole, and there was nothing, just snow blowing sideways in the wind. I figured it was a branch or something, maybe knocked loose by the storm. and went back to bed. But it didn't stop there. The next morning I noticed something. Footprints. Bare footprints leading from the woods to my front porch, and then disappearing back into the trees. I don't know why, but seeing those prints gave me this cold, sinking feeling in my stomach. They weren't boot prints or animal tracks or anything that made sense. Just bare human feet. I told myself it was fine, that maybe someone was out hiking, or I don't know, lost their shoes in the middle of a storm. It was stupid, but I didn't want to think about what else it could be. I went about my day like nothing was wrong. Shoveled snow, chopped wood, tried to convince myself I wasn't freaked out, but that night the knocking came back. Louder this time, and it wasn't just knocking. It was followed by this faint whispering like someone was just outside the walls, speaking so softly I couldn't make out the words. My chest felt tight. I sat on the edge of my bed, holding my flashlight like it was some kind of weapon, trying to convince myself it was the wind. Just the wind. But it didn't feel like the wind. And then it stopped, just like that. No fading away, no gradual silence. 1 second there was whispering, and the next nothing. The next day the snow let up a bit, and I tried to check for tracks. The bare footprints were back, only this time they didn't just stop at the porch. They circled the cabin, around and around like whoever or whatever had made them was just pacing outside while I slept. I couldn't stay another night. I packed a bag, grabbed some supplies, and planned to head into town first thing in the morning. But of course the storm had other plans. By the time I opened the door, the snow was coming down so hard I could barely see a few feet in front of me. The wind howled, and it felt like the cabin was holding its breath, waiting for something. That night I didn't even bother trying to sleep. I sat by the fire, every light in the cabin blazing, trying to ignore the feeling that I wasn't alone. And then it happened. The sound of footsteps on the porch. Slow, deliberate, and way too heavy to be the wind. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the flashlight. I wanted to look, but I couldn't bring myself to move. Then there was a tapping. Not on the door this time, on the window. I don't know why, but that made it so much worse. My stomach dropped. I forced myself to turn and look, and there she was. She was pale, like snow, and wore this mask that looked like it had been carved out of bone. Her hair was dark and wet, clinging to her face, and her hands were pressed against the glass, fingers so thin they looked like claws. She didn't move. She didn't say anything. She just stared at me, her breath fogging the window. I don't even remember standing up. 1 second I was sitting by the fire, and the next I was pressed against the far wall, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. I wanted to scream to run, but I couldn't do either. All I could do was stare back, and then she smiled. Not a big smile, just the smallest, most unsettling curl of her lips. And she whispered something. I didn't understand the words, but they felt like ice crawling up my spine. The lights flickered, and just as quickly as she'd appeared, she was gone. The next morning, I found something on the porch. A bundle of sticks tied with red string with the mask resting on top and beneath it. Scratched into the wood were the words, "Let me in." I haven't been back to the cabin since. Hell, I don't even like going outside when it snows. And every once in a while, late at night, I think I hear knocking. 3 slow, deliberate taps. I don't answer. This was a few years back, up in the mountains where winters were less chilly and more try not to freeze to death. I was living in this old cabin I'd inherited from my grandfather. Solid place, but it creaked in the wind and the insulation was not great. Anyway, the storm came in fast, faster than the forecast predicted. By noon, the temperature had dropped so low you could feel the cold in your bones even indoors. I was bundled up by the fireplace trying to stay warm. When the wind picked up, it was howling like it had a personal vendetta. At first, I tried to ignore it, tossing another log on the fire and convincing myself it was just another bad storm. But then the sound changed. It wasn't just wind anymore. It was something else. It started with scratching, faint, almost like a tree branch against the side of the house. Except there weren't any trees close enough to touch the walls. I figured maybe it was some animal trying to find shelter, but was too deliberate. It moved too, from one side of the cabin to the other. I told myself it was nothing, but my grip on my coffee mug got a little tighter. Hours passed, and the temperature kept dropping. Even with the fire roaring, the chill crept in, settling into my hands and feet. I kept thinking about my animals in the barn. I didn't have much, just a couple of goats and some chickens, but they were mine, you know. Their muffled bleats and clucks carried through the storm. For the first time, they didn't sound like animals being animals. They sounded scared. And then, as if the storm wasn't enough, there was this long, slow scrape across the front door. I froze. It came again, but louder, like claws raking across wood. My heart started pounding in my ears. I told myself, maybe it's just the wind. My gut wasn't buying it. Then I heard it. Footsteps on the roof. Not heavy ones, more like something light and quick, moving back and forth like it was looking for a way in. I grabbed my shotgun from the corner. I hadn't used it in ages, but suddenly I was glad I kept it loaded. My hands were shaking as I cocked it. I tried to tell myself I was being paranoid, but the sounds outside didn't stop. They were everywhere, scraping, tapping, and this awful, faint clicking like ice cracking under pressure. I peeked out the frosted window, just a sliver. At first, all I saw was white, snow swirling in every direction. Then I noticed movement, shapes. They were hunched and angular, like jagged sculptures made of ice. Their bodies shimmered, catching the faint light from my fire. And their eyes, God, their eyes glowed this eerie, unnatural blue. I ducked back, heart racing. I didn't know what I was looking at, but I knew it wasn't good. The scratching turned into pounding, and the whole cabin seemed to shudder under the weight of whatever was out there. I could feel my breath coming faster, fogging up the window, and then the fire died, not a gradual dimming. Just out, like someone had flipped a switch, the cabin plunged into darkness, and suddenly the cold felt alive, pressing in on me. I tried to relight it, but every time I struck a match, it went out immediately. That's when I realized they were on the chimney. The barn was the first to go. I heard the wood splintering, followed by the animals' terrified cries. I didn't need to see it to know what was happening. Whatever those things were, they got inside. The screams didn't last long. I sat there in the dark, shotgun in my lap, trying to think. Staying inside wasn't an option. They'd find a way in sooner or later. But going outside in that storm, it felt like choosing between freezing to death or whatever they had planned. Neither seemed great. Eventually I decided. I threw on my heaviest coat, grabbed the shotgun and a propane torch and cracked open the door. The storm hit me like a slap in the face. Snow whipped around me, stinging my skin, and the cold was so intense it hurt to breathe. But the worst part, they were waiting. They stepped out of the storm. One by one, their glowing eyes fixed on me. I raised the shotgun and fired. The sound was deafening, but it worked. Sort of. One of them shattered into a spray of icy shards, but the rest didn't even flinch. They just kept coming, circling me like wolves. I swung the torch around, the flame casting sharp, flickering shadows. That made them hesitate. Not much, but enough for me to start moving. Running through knee-deep snows like trying to sprint through quicksand. I didn't get far before one of them lunged, claws raking across my coat. I stumbled and fell face first into the snow. And then this part still feels like a dream. Headlights appear through the blizzard. A plow truck, its salt spread, are gleaming like a miracle. The creatures froze, their blue eyes narrowing. The driver, some old-timer I'd never seen before, pulled up and yelled, "Get in." I didn't need to be told twice. As soon as I climbed in, the creatures backed off, their icy bodies shrinking into the shadows. The salt trail the truck left seemed to keep them at bay. I slumped into the seat, too cold and exhausted to speak. The driver didn't ask questions, and I didn't offer explanations. I left the cabin after that. Couldn't bring myself to stay. Now, whenever I hear the wind howl on a cold night, I wonder if they're still out there, waiting for the next storm to bring them back. You know how sometimes you make a decision that seems harmless at the time, but later you realize it was one of the dumbest things you've ever done? Yeah, that's how I feel about the night we went to the abandoned carnival. It was smack in the middle of winter, freezing cold, with a snowstorm in the forecast. My boyfriend, Evan, and his cousin Claire thought it'd be fun to check out this old, creepy fairground up in the hills. Everyone in town knew about it. Frost Hollow Fair, they called it. Apparently it had shut down years ago after some horrible accident. Nobody talked about what happened exactly, but the usual stories floated around. Rides malfunctioning, people disappearing, and a rumor about a worker who died under suspicious circumstances. The place had been left to rot ever since. I wasn't exactly excited to go. The idea of trudging through snow to explore a place where people probably got hurt wasn't my definition of fun, but Claire swore it was cool. Evan, being the thrill seeker he was, wouldn't shut up about it. Against my better judgment, I said yes. Looking back, I should have just stayed home with a blanket and some hot chocolate. We parked at the edge of a snowy trail leading into the woods. The moon was out, lighting up the snow enough to see without flashlights. Evan had brought a thermos of what he called warming tea. Judging by the smell, it was mostly whiskey. Claire had her camera, claiming she wanted to document the adventure. I wasn't sure if she meant for Instagram or for proof if we went missing. The hike wasn't long, but it was unnervingly quiet. You ever notice how snow absorbs sound? No crunch of branches, no animals, just the crunch of our boots and the occasional slurp from Evan's thermos. By the time we reached the carnival gates, I was already regretting coming along. The gates were rusted, barely hanging onto their hinges. Above them, a faded sign read, "Welcome to Frost Hollow Fair." Half the letters were missing, and the ones that remained looked like they were barely clinging to the metal. Beyond the gates, the place was a mess. Broken down rides, crumbling booths, and snow-covered debris were everywhere. Claire was thrilled. "This is so cool." She snapped pictures left and right. Evan nudged me and grinned. "Seaman, where's your sense of adventure?" "I left it at home," I muttered, but I followed them in any way. The first thing we saw was the carousel, or what was left of it. The paint on the horses was peeling. Their faces cracked and weathered. One of them had lost its head entirely. The whole thing creaked in the wind, the kind of sound that raises the hairs on your neck. Claire ran up to take more pictures. Evan, of course, decided to climb onto one of the horses, laughing as the thing wobbled under his weight. I stayed back, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling creeping over me. The air was weirdly still, like the place was holding its breath. And then I heard it, a faint whisper. At first I thought it was Claire or Evan, but when I looked at them, they weren't saying a word. The whisper wasn't coming from them. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere all at once. "You guys hear that?" I asked. "Hear what?" Evan said, hopping off the carousel. It sounded like whispering. I said, "Those saying it out loud made me feel a little ridiculous." Claire shrugged. "Probably the wind." But there was no wind. We wandered deeper into the fairground, past a popcorn stand that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. The faint smell of something burnt lingered in the air, even though everything was covered in snow. Benny, Claire's dog, started acting weird. He'd been bounding ahead of us happily enough, but now he froze, his tail tucked between his legs. His ears twitched as if he was hearing something we couldn't. He let out a low growl, staring at something near the old Ferris wheel. "Benny, come on," Claire said, but he wouldn't move. His growl deepened. And that's when I saw it, something shifting in the shadows near the wheel. At first, I thought it was just the way the moonlight hit the broken metal. But then it moved slow and deliberate. A tall, thin figure, draped in something that shimmered like ice. I could feel its eyes on me, though I couldn't make out a face. My chest tightened, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. "We need to go," I whispered, grabbing Evan's arm. "Relax," he said, trying to laugh it off. "It's probably just some old tarp blowing in the wind." "Then why is there no wind?" I shot back. Claire was snapping pictures again, but she froze when she looked at one of them. Guys, look at this." She held up the Polaroid, and my stomach dropped. The picture showed the carousel, but there was something standing next to one of the horses. The same tall frost-covered figure I'd just seen, and it was staring right at the camera. Evan finally stopped laughing. "Okay, that's creepy." Before we could decide what to do, the lights flickered on. Not all at once, but one by one. The carousel, the Ferris wheel, the game booths. The entire carnival came alive, glowing in the snow like some kind of frozen nightmare. Music started playing, distorted and warbling like an old record on its last spin. "Run," I said, barely able to get the word out. We didn't need to be told twice. Benny took off first, dragging Claire behind him. Evan grabbed my hand, and we sprinted toward the gates. The snow was falling harder now, blurring everything around us. But the whispers were still there, louder and closer, like a crowd of invisible people following us. Behind us, I heard the groan of metal, something heavy moving. I didn't dare look back, but I could feel it, that icy presence chasing us. My legs burned. My lungs felt like they might burst, but I kept running. When we reached the gates, they slammed shut behind us with a deafening clang. The lights inside the carnival flickered and went out, plunging everything back into darkness. We didn't stop running until we were back at the car. None of us talked about it on the drive home. Claire tore up the Polaroids, and Evan poured the rest of his tea out the window. I couldn't sleep for days after, and when I finally did, I dreamt of frost-covered figures and whispers in the dark. I haven't been back to Frost Hollow since, and I don't plan to. But sometimes, on quiet winter nights, I think I can still hear the music. You know, there's this strange memory that comes back every time it rains, like some kind of haunting. It's not exactly a horror story, but it's unsettling. Anyway, it all started with this old superstition my dad had. He was convinced that the first rain after a dry spell held something different, something almost sacred. Keep your mouth closed when it rains, he'd say, deadly serious. That water doesn't belong in us. He had all kinds of odd little warnings like that. Strange bits of advice that somehow found their way into my head, whether I believed in them or not. One late afternoon in November, I was heading out to grab a few groceries. The sky was that deep gray that promised rain. And there was this heavy chill in the air that seeps right into your bones. By the time I was paying at the register, the rain started coming down hard. Big cold drops that made you feel every inch of dampness. I bundled up in my coat, hugging the groceries to my chest as I ran to the car. But just as I loaded everything inside, I noticed her. A young woman standing right in the middle of the parking lot, staring up at the sky, mouth wide open like she was trying to drink the rain. She had no coat, no umbrella, nothing. Her hair was matted to her face, and her mascara had smeared down her cheeks like dark streaks. She looked completely drenched. There was something about her that didn't sit right. I couldn't stop staring, and in my head I heard my dad's warning as clearly as if he were standing right there. That water doesn't belong in us. I hadn't thought of that in years, but watching her, it all came rushing back. For a moment, I just sat there debating what to do. The whole scene was unsettling, but I couldn't bring myself to just drive off. So after a second, I got out of the car and called over to her, trying to sound casual. "Hey, you're gonna catch a cold." Nothing. She didn't even blink. Her face stayed tilted up, eyes wide, mouth open, letting the rain pour in like she was a statue. It was like she wasn't even there, just frozen in place while the rain poured down. I thought about going to get help, but something held me back. There was something about the way she stood, soaked and vacant, that made me feel like I was intruding on something I wasn't meant to see. And then out of nowhere, the store's owner. This old gruff guy I'd seen a few times came outside. He glanced at her, then at me. His eyebrows furrowed. "Everything okay here?" he asked, sounding more annoyed than concerned. I shrugged, feeling a bit silly. "I don't know. She's just standing there drinking the rain." The old guy shook his head and muttered something under his breath as he walked over. He reached out and tapped her shoulder. "Miss, you all right?" Still nothing. She didn't even seem to feel his touch. He shook her shoulder a bit harder. "Come on now. You can't just stand here." And then she just tipped over. Like someone had cut her strings, her head hit the concrete with a horrible smack and water spilled from her mouth, pulling around her head. Dark water mixed with a little blood. A wave of nausea rolled over me as I watched. It wasn't normal water. It was thick and dark, almost like oil. Something that looked wrong. Oh my God, the old guy muttered, dropping to his knees. He kept saying it over and over and over, his hands shaking. I was just frozen, staring with my phone clutched in my hand, like it was going to help. And then her body moved. She coughed, a horrible wet sound, and more dark water gushed out of her mouth. Her eyes were wide open, staring straight up at the sky. Then her limbs started to twitch, jerking in strange, unnatural ways like something else was controlling her. She rose onto her toes, her body arching back, balancing only on the tips of her feet, and gasped like she was trying to drink more of the rain. It was unreal, like some kind of nightmare. The old man and I just stood there, frozen, watching. She kept moving in these strange, jerky motions, her mouth open, eyes locked on the sky. Then, without any warning, she turned toward us. Her body twisted, her head still tilted up, and she stared right at us. I felt this surge of fear, like my whole body had turned to lead. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe. And then she lunged. I stumbled back, tripping over my own feet, and she fell onto the old man, water pouring from her mouth, drowning him as it gushed over his face. He sputtered, tried to push her off, but then he just stopped moving, his body going limp beneath her weight. And then he started drinking too. I didn't wait to see what happened next. I bolted for my car, hearing the slap of bare feet behind me. I threw myself into the driver's seat, fumbling with a lock, but before I could shut the door, she was there. Her face pressed up against the window, rain streaming down her cheeks, eyes wide, mouth open. She clawed at the door, her fingers bending back with sickening snaps as she tried to get inside. I yanked the door shut just in time, trapping her hand in the frame. Her fingers twisted, bending at impossible angles, but she didn't make a sound. She just kept clawing, her broken fingers scrabbling against the glass like she didn't even feel the pain. I scrambled over to the passenger side, throwing myself out and slamming the door behind me. She was trapped inside, her face pressed against the glass, her eyes darting back and forth, like she was still searching for something. Or someone. And that's when I saw the old man. He was stumbling toward me, his mouth wide open, eyes wide, his head tilted back, like he was looking at the sky too. He moved slowly, his steps uneven, but there was something unnatural in the way he moved, like he was being pulled by invisible strings. My heart pounded as I ran. My dad's words echoing in my head. That water doesn't belong in us. I crashed back into the store, knocking over displays, barely able to see straight. I just needed to get away to hide. When I looked back, he was standing at the entrance, his body bent and twisted, mouth open. And then he started walking toward me. I grabbed the first thing I could find, a heavy wrench from a nearby display, and held it up, barely able to steady my hands. He kept coming and I swung, feeling the wrench connect with a horrible thud. He crumpled, dark water spilling from his mouth, pulling around him, and I backed away, breathless. I don't remember much after that. I must have run or screamed, but somehow I got away. Ever since then, I felt different. Every time it rains, I feel this strange pull, like I should go outside, look up, and open my mouth. But I don't. Instead, I lock myself inside, staying far from the windows, waiting for the rain to pass. And every now and then I hear stories. Stories of someone out there in the rain, mouth open, drinking it all in.